Hey everyone, we're here. We're starting off the conference today. It's 4 o'clock Central Time, and we have our first speaker, Dave Carr of Carr or Raging Cider and Mead Company. And so, what I'm gonna do, this is gonna be a little bit of a different setup. So I'm going to read through some of the webinar settings versus the meeting settings that you guys might be used to on our monthly interest group calls. And after that, I will go into a little bit about our membership, just some basic background, and then I will just tell you a little bit about how this webinar format is going to work with our national conference here over the next 3 days. Most every one of our hosts is going to read the exact same thing that I'm reading off to you, so you'll probably get used to hearing it. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my. Oh, and Leslie's right there.
Hey there, I just wanted to make sure we're recording so we can have a really good record of this. Do you have this recording, Sean Charles?
I
It is.
it
I heard it
is.
said recording progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
And it's being transcribed. So we're getting a really good package deal there. Okay. Um, so let me get to my screen share. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Gotta move this bar around. Okay, there we go. So welcome to the North American Fruit Explorers Virtual Conference. My name is John Charles Williams, and I'm a volunteer board member and director at NAFEX, as we call the organization for short. And I will be serving as a facilitator for this session. So this is going to be thinking outside of the cider box. It's also going to include Perry and possibly some other variations of fermentation or fermenting. Before I introduce today's panel or panelist, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items and a little bit about NAFEX as we allow a few more people to join. First, this is a webinar, so unlike in Zoom meetings, participants' audio and video features are automatically disabled. You'll notice that you can't chat with each other like participants usually do in Zoom meetings. Secondly, we encourage you to ask questions. Please use the Q&A tab versus the chat feature that you might be used to in Zoom to tee up questions or technical support questions for our co-hosts. I am a host, Chris O'Mannix is a host, and we have back with us out of retirement, Leslie Wade. So she'll be assisting you. Just saw her pop on the screen. So if you have questions, please drop it in the Q&A. And finally, this is a webinar, so it's being recorded, and we will make this available to our members and conference participants after the conference at nafex.org, along with bonus resources like printable versions of our speakers' presentations. Just a few words about NAFEX for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. We were founded in 1967. The North American Fruit Explorers is a network of individuals throughout the United States and Canada devoted to discovery, cultivation, and appreciation of superior variety of fruits and nuts. NAFEX members share ideas, information, experiences, and fruit propagating material via our website, social media channels, fruit-specific interest groups and meetings, and annual conferences like this one, whether it's in person or online, or a combination of both. As a paid NAFEX member, you get 4 editions of the Pomona Journal each year, as well as the ability to search 50 years worth of Pomonas on our digital library, which contain a wealth of fruit growing information. If you haven't already, we encourage you to visit our website to learn more at nafex.org. And it is my pleasure today to announce our speaker. We will be joined by, you'll see him on screen, Dave Carr of, there's a lot of cars in Cider, I learned. But this is Dave Carr of the West Coast of Raging Cider and Mead Company. If you are into fruit exploration or feral fruit or finding people doing innovative orcharding practices with feral and seedling fruit, you might have run across Dave and his page and the good work they're doing. So we're going to learn more about that today. And with that, we are going to hold all questions to the end. Sometimes we do take a break in the middle, but we're going to hold all the questions to the end, and we're going to have multiple people looking at the Q&A section. So if Dave answers a question in his presentation that you might have presented in Q&A, we're going to go ahead and mark that as asked. If you haven't gotten the full answer to your question, please put it in there again and qualify it or clarify it so we can understand exactly what you're trying to get out of our speaker. So with that, I'm going to stop my share screening feature and I'm going to turn it over to our panelist, Dave Carr, and I'm going to ask him to unmute himself and share his screen. Dave?
Hey,
There you
how
go.
are you?
Yep, I can hear you.
Are we good?
Okay,
Looks great.
take it away.
Hi, I'm Dave from Raging Cider. We're located here in San Diego County, just north of the Mexican border. Um, we're going to be talking about the company, our approach, the fruit that we grow, the environment, and all the different things that we're doing today. To start off about our company, we started back in 2015. In fact, this month is 9 years for us. I I became interested in cider when I was a kid visiting family in England and didn't really like English ales, and I started drinking ciders in the pubs and fell in love with them. When I came back here, of course, there was no cider to be had that I could find, especially out here on the West Coast. So I didn't really mess with it for a while, and then started to fall in love with it again. My wife actually had to go gluten free, so I started to mess around more with making ciders for her, and getting up into the mountains. I knew there were apples, and started finding sources. So started making ciders from some trees that were on our property, and then from stuff up in the mountains, and basically went forward with the company. Um, We're a very family-oriented business. We basically, my son and my daughter are partners with me in it. My son does a lot of cellar work, helps with harvesting, planting, and other orchard work. His wife likes to run deliveries for us up to our local bottle shops and so on. My daughter spends time. I'm reading the screen, but she helps with harvest and planting. She's also works at the county ag department, so she's great for helping us talk about pests that are in the orchard, as well as like mushrooms that are detrimental and beneficial bugs that are in the orchard. So she's been a great help. And then her husband worked in orchards for a long time, and so he helps us with harvest and helps us with pruning and grafting. Also, my grandkids, which are shown there, they're Travis's kids. They help us out with harvest here and there. So that's always a fun time when they're interested. This is a quick picture, and I'll get back to this later. This is something we do. We're trying to bring people into what cider is and the local orchards and bring an awareness to it. So every year we do a community harvest, and these are some pictures from I think community harvest this year. Yeah, this year and last year. So people that who are into cider, they come up, help us harvest. But again, I'll talk about that later. Um, our local approach is that we only harvest fruit and apples and pears, quince, whatever from local orchards, local farms, and local beekeepers. One of our big things is to support the local farming community and regrow the rich apple and pear orcharding traditions of the San Diego mountains, in particular the Julian region, but we also have Palomar Mountain, Watai area, and there's another place called the Chihuahua Valley, where there's apples growing. We've committed also to buying ugly fruit from these orchards and other farms so that we can help the farmers have a secondary income source on fruit that may have gone to waste. And with regards to apples and pears, a lot of times we work with local U-picks that have fruit that's interesting to us, and we'll purchase that fruit from those U-picks. That especially after the weekends, I don't know if any of you go to U-Picks, but you can see the millions of apples that end up falling on the ground and they can't be sold for food anymore. So we purchase that fruit from these farmers and help them with their income streams. Our apples come from a diverse source of trees, including 80 to 100 and up to 140, about 140, 145-year-old trees that were Those older trees were grafted onto seedling rootstocks that were planted by the original settlers. There's a newer range of trees that were 20, it says 50 years, but I'd say 20 to 80 years that were often planted on full standard or semi-standard rootstocks. And then the more recent orchards, especially in the high water producing areas where there's wells that can produce a lot of water, are typically planted on semi-dwarf with the idea that they're able to get their trees up into production sooner. And we've been planting ourselves on M1. We started with M111, B118, P18, and Antonovka rootstock, mostly for climate resilience. And we'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later. But after a few years of experimenting, we're leaning towards the larger rootstocks. I'm going to skip some of this because I address it again later. But with regards to pears, we're typically planted on OHX F87 and 97 in the newer orchards. And again, seedling rootstocks in the older orchards. Many of the older apple varieties that are typically found here, especially in the oldest orchards, were ones that did well in the South, including Stamen, Black Twig, Wine Sap, Arkansas Black, and Smith Cider. Other varieties have included Jonathan, Ben Davis, Hyssop Crab, Red Astrakhan, Northern Spy, Macintosh, Newtown Pippin, Golden Russet, Hawkeye, Red Delicious, Gravenstein. And then the older pear varieties were such things like Lincoln, Kiefer, Red, Yellow Bartlett, Downju, and Comas, and Seckel. Later, other varieties were planted like Liberty, Empire, Golden Delicious, Granny Smith, John of Gold, Maccoon, Brayburn, Gala, Honeycrisp, and Cameo, and more. And then in the most newest varieties, there's been a big interest in planting cider orchards. So you see a lot of things like Kingston Black, Nihow, Burford Red Flesh, Redfield, Muscata Bernay, Yarlington Mill, Harrison, Campfield, Granny Weekle, Colaus, Teorica, and a lot more. Basically, here it's a hit and miss experimentation phase where we're trying to figure out what varieties do well. Most of those seem to do very well so far. We also see pears like Barland, Yellow Huffcap, Barnett, Spicer Wasserburn, and a number of other English Perry pears planted here in San Diego. You see here, move forward. So climate. Let's talk about San Diego County. We're basically there's a friend of mine from Black Duck Cider, and he says we grow apples in the desert. So it's not quite the desert, but it is a hot and arid climate. So it can be a very challenging climate to grow apples in. The county itself is full of microclimates. It's crazy because you can be on the coast and have areas that'll hit the mid to low 20s in the evenings, and yet you can go 2, 3, 4 miles away and find people growing mangoes, cherimoya, and bananas that would be destroyed by those sorts of temperatures. So it's a really interesting area. Let's see here. Basically, our topography here in the county, when you're talking about the coastal regions, are largely plateaus with canyons and a few hills interspersed here and there. As you move inland, you start to hit foothills of the mountains. So the foothills start building up. You can get foothills up into the 3,000 foot range. And then as you head farther east and north, you'll start hitting mountains that are in the 4,000 to 6,000 foot level. Because of those high elevations, during the winter, it gets very cold and we get snows, though that is reducing as we've been going forward into time. But generally, we get plenty of chill for growing palm fruit. The biggest problem we're having is in the spring times, we're having early warm-ups and then late freezes, which has happened to us this year. We had trees waking up in March, and in April we had a really hard freeze, which in a couple of areas really damaged a lot of the trees, and we lost a ton of fruit. And while let me see here, while we manage and help with orchards in the mountains, we also have an experimental orchard in the foothills, which is around 2,000 feet. So as far as the hard freeze late, that's not an issue for us, but we can get 900 chill hours one winter, and we can get 400 chill hours another winter. So that can be a very challenging thing, but what we're looking for there is varieties that will do well at lower chill. Our soils here tend to be granitic and loamy. There are areas of clay, and when you get up to the coast, actually, there are a lot of sandy soils. As such, we have mostly excellent drainage, except for the more clay areas, which needs to be amended and new planting sites to retain moisture, often, because of our dry climate. Um, we've been working with minimal to largely no tillage of the land and layering organic materials in the form of compost and wood mulch and cutting winter crops. So we'll plant winter crops which here we can grow, especially at the lower elevations. We can plant. We do a wide range of everything from grasses and legumes and other things that we'll then mow in the springtime. And in the mountains, typically in the springtime, we'll plant things like this, and then we'll mow them a little later to let them rot in place. With the wood mulch, we actually experiment a lot with wine cap mushrooms and a couple others to break down the wood mulch into food for the trees. A lot of all of this helps promote moisture retention and builds food needed by our trees to grow, which is a wonderful side effect. And in addition, we do ground injections of compost tea into the root zone around the trees to help build the trees. And then later on, we do also sprays of compost teas onto the trees. Yes, we are a drier environment, so in that case, we don't have to worry as much about other disease pressures. Let's see here. All right, so we have a lot of seedling trials going on as well. We're really interested in producing ciders that are, in the long run, will be largely American-based or based on this continent, so that they'll be more resistant to disease. So a lot of times what we do is we retain open pollinated seeds from fruit that we press, especially fruit that we've grown in our low chill orchard. And then we'll plant those seeds out and we'll see how they do at our experimental low chill orchard, which is our farmstead. And we'll see which ones seem to be adapted to that, and we'll retain those at that property. And then we plant those along the street in a row. And then the others are taken up to the mountains and planted. We always, with our promising seedlings, we have a Frankenstein tree at our farmstead, and we have a Frankenstein tree up in the mountains. We will graft onto those trees. And that way, if something happens, like the gophers get at the roots and we lose the tree when they're young, we still have a record of that fruit and we can see what it becomes as it matures.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pause you there for 1 second. I just want to remember. I just want our members to remember that if they have, this is going to get really interesting with these seedling trials and some of the information that's come up or just been presented. So go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. It's a little different than the chat, but just go ahead and put your questions there because Dave's going to be presenting some really interesting information on his trials and some other things. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, and a lot of the things too, we're looking for resilience. So we actually torture our trees when they're young. I mean, we do irrigate them, but we want to see with these seedlings, we want to see which ones are going to be able to handle irregular watering and so on. So when we do have them growing, they don't get as much water as say any trees that we've grafted and are growing on our rootstock. We really want trees that can. Basically, they'll throw their roots out and survive in a inhospitable environment. Another part of our trials is to find local wild fruit, as well as fruit from the early seedling rootstocks that seem to do very well here and produce useful fruit. So a few of the local seedling wild fruit we have named at this point are Brown's Best, which is a seedling rootstock apple. It really doesn't taste like much fresh, but when you press it, it becomes this deep amber, smoky, bittersweet juice and makes fantastic cider. Other than it does need to have something acidic blended with it. Mangini is a subacid, delicious apple to eat. Actually, they're a little bit on the small side, but they're full of flavor and aromatics, and add something fantastic to cider. And that is a wild apple, which we don't have a lot of here in San Diego. You'll see most of these are going to be seedling rootstock, but it is a wild apple growing at the bottom of an orchard in a ditch where there's obviously water, probably more likely than in other spots in the county. Witch's Kiss is an intensely acidic, bitter sharp apple, actually growing in the orchard of Dave Lewis, who is a local farming and town historian for Julian. His family's been there since the 1880s. The apple is absolutely horrible to eat. It's like biting into the worst lemon warhead that you've ever had. And it's got some cool, like soft tannins, and it's a great blender for cider. Even though the sugars are on the low side, it actually adds a ton of character to a cider. Storm Crab is another wild apple. It actually grows on the fence line at Storm Ranch Cider and Wine up in Julian. It's growing near to a couple of rows of transcendent crab apples, and I'm assuming that it's probably related to the transcendence. It's subacid, but it's got this really cool taste of cotton candy, and it's fun to eat, and actually blends really well into cider. Guatai Pippin, we suspect is a seedling rootstock and not wild due to where it's growing. It's growing in front of this house at this orchard that we manage. The When you look at the trunk, it's this fused mass of suckers that have all kind of come up. We honestly at first thought it was Newtown Pippin. As I looked at it more, though, it's got a drier flesh. It's far more oblate, and it can be covered in a russet webbing all over the apple. And once fermented, it has really good acidity, fantastic aromatics. It's a great single varietal and just a little bit lighter tannin than Newtown Pippin, which here on the West Coast, Newtown Pippin develops tannins. I don't know how. By my experience on the East Coast, we don't see that as much. Let me see. The third or the last of the apples I'm going to talk about is the Samagatuma seedling, which is also in the same orchard area. It's a very mild, bittersweet. It's just four huge, massive trunks, so that leads us to believe it's probably a seedling rootstock as well. It's very juicy and damages easily, and it's definitely a blender. It does not do well on its own, but it has something to add to a blend of cider. These are some of the apples. The lower, actually, all of these apples in this picture are that Guatai Pippin. So that's all the various looks that it can have. You can see it can be completely russeted. You've got the lacy russeting, and then in other spots it's very lightly russeted. They all have these dark lenticels on, and you can see how flat and oblate that they are. Also, so more than apples, San Diego County has this I don't understand why, but it seems to be really well suited to wild pears. So we have, again, probably because it's drier, they get a little less pressure from fire blight. That we do have fire blight here, so maybe it allows more to get up. Some of the seedling and the wild pears that we found here are like Screeching Weasel, which is this insanely bitter, mildly acidic pear with high sugar. I mean, it can hit, actually, we've had it hit 32, 33 bricks. But if you put that in your mouth, you'll rue ever having it in your mouth. I tried to swallow the juice one time and I felt like someone was sanding my throat, or that I had basically was getting the flu for 2 days before my throat pretty much healed up from it. We think it's a seedling rootstock because it grows on a mound, and it grows kind of in a bushy appearance. There's another one called mound pear, which grows very close to it. We believe it's another seedling rootstock. It's similar but different. It's got less bitterness and roughly the same acidity. And it does not develop quite as high as sugars either. So it's generally more in the 18 to 20 Brix range. Um, then we've got holler pear, which I love this pear. Grows it grows down below a section of Lincoln pears, and so my belief is that Lincoln pear has rolled down into this little hollow on the hillside down below the rest of the trees, and it grew up from there. It's I think 6, 7 trunks coming up. It's slightly tannic. It's got acidity. And when it ferments, it's got these really cool tropical notes. They're not very much apparent fresh, but when it ferments out, these tropical notes kind of come through. Uh, and it's growing in this forested area surrounded by pines and oaks. The Glen pear is another lighter bitter pear, but it has really super high acidity and a great flavor and high sugar as well. Again, it'll get up into the high 20s with the sugars. The flesh is all. In fact, most of these pears, the flesh is all breaking and easy to juice. We don't have to use rice hulls to press them. It makes a great single varietal perry, but we mostly use it in our peripheral as we don't have enough pears of any one variety to really do it and release a single varietal. And it's likely a wild pear. According to the people, they've lived there since the 1800s. This grows in front of an auto repair shop that they have. And they said the tree's been there as long as they can remember. So Banner is another one that I just found this year, and it's this mildly tannic, larger pear with great flavor and really good acidity. We suspect it's going to be a good for Perry pear. We're doing a small batch of a single varietal of that this year. It's a wild tree growing in literally about a 2 foot space between the Banner grade and a steep embankment that goes down to a stream bed below. And the Banner grade is a road that heads out of Julian down into the desert. So these are a small sampling of all the interesting fruits that we've have managed to scrape out of living here in San Diego with no care. We're putting most of them into orchard settings because we want to see how they perform and taste and produce in an orchard setting. Another part of our seedling trials is we've been trading some of these varieties around the country with John at Black Duck or Kevin at Rose Hill, Benford at Floral Terrains, and others. Plus, we've also purchased wild seedling varieties from Matt at Gnarly Pippins and others and grafted them into orchards here to see how they perform. Again, with that long-term goal of trying to produce ciders from varieties that have their roots here in North America, but yet will produce ciders that have all the nuance you can find in European ciders. This you can see, these are like on the left is our initial grafting. So we graft into these 5-gallon pots and we'll grow them at our low chill orchard. This is also to see what varieties may be adapted to our low chill. So we'll watch for what goes dormant relatively early. Whatever doesn't, then we take up to the mountains and we allow them to finish going dormant there. On the right, this is our mountain seedling nursery. So once we've taken them up there, we'll transplant them into these bins and give them another year of growth before they go out into the orchard. Basically, we learned a hard lesson where we had a bunch of 1-year-old trees that we put out into the orchard down there at Watai, and they had some irrigation issues, and we lost the majority of all those 1-year-olds. Again, here, that's the seedlings on the left, getting ready to be planted, and on the right, growing or actually after they got dropped off on the left to go dormant, and on the right are them actually coming back to life and in their second year. These are pictures of a lot of the feral fruit we have here in San Diego. The second one over is that's the Storm Ranch, the Storm wild crab that we have. This is an unidentified feral apple growing up on Palomar Mountain. We have lots of pears. Like I think this is the mound pear. This is the Holler pear. This is an unknown pear. It could be kefir, but we don't know that's growing. And this is just another. I think this was. I honestly can't remember what that pear is. But we have so many varieties. Um, as far as like our orchards themselves, I mentioned earlier, we started out with M111 because they were supposed to be tolerant to dry weather and really resilient and of course adaptable to multiple soils. But after 3 years, we discovered that they weren't resilient in a hot, dry environment as we had hoped. In addition, they seem very attractive to gophers, so we've lost umpteen apples to gophers with and without gopher cages around them. We've come in and seen 5 and 6 year old trees on M111 that's been chewed through by gophers, and the trees have just dropped. For a semi-standard rootstock, we've been messing around with B118, and it's first off something about the wood. I don't know if it's tougher or what, but it seems to be more unpalatable to gophers. It also seems to be a bit more forgiving to poor watering regimens. As I mentioned before, they sometimes have at this orchard that we manage, which is more than an hour away from us, they have occasional irrigation issues with pumps breaking down, and so it seemed to stuff that's been planted on that have seemed to carry through a little bit better than anything that was ever on M111. More recently, we've been switching over to P18 and Antonovka more because of the ability of them to withstand long-term issues with watering and so on. And plus, we found that they grow very vigorously here, and they're also seem to be very much less palatable to gophers, and stand up to irrigation issues even better. They seem to grow very vigorously even when we've had like water outages. Um, Talking about irrigation here, we are, as I said, kind of like not a desert, but we're a semi-arid environment. The majority of our rainfall does come in winter. Um, in July and August, we do get occasional monsoonal rainfall, and sometimes, like last year, we had actually a tropical storm that hit the mountains and dumped tons of rain. In fact, our harvest last year was the lowest Brix harvest we've ever had because the apples just swelled with all the water. Plus, we also had a late winter. Um, but yeah, in July, August, we tend to get monsoonal rainfall. So our dry farmed orchards, like one we take care of in Julian, that's where they'll get the rest of the water that'll carry them through the harvest. And in order to establish our orchards, we generally early on with the grafted trees, will water long and deep to promote deep root growth. The idea being is to eventually only have to water 2, 3, maybe 4 times, depending on the year, maximum in the growing season. Long-term waterings, but done, over 24 hours. But again, just 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 times in the year, depending on what the year is doing. As noted, there are hundreds, if not a couple thousand, old full standard trees scattered around the region, living their lives without any irrigation whatsoever, other than what they get from nature. Here's the planting session. That's our friend Kevin on the right, who has come out and helped us plant since year one. He's been a really good friend and a good helper. Let's see, harvesting. So when we get to harvest time, we do a lot of our harvesting by shaking and knocking fruit out of the trees. So we're not out there with picking bags. A lot of the trees, like I said, they're full standards. So you get trees that are, I mean, this particular pear tree on the right that my wife is helping me harvest is actually about 35 feet tall. So we never even get all the fruit on top, even with my 10-foot ladder and an extension panking poles. We generally don't get the top 5 feet or so of the tree. So we'll knock the fruit down onto tarps spread out below. We also do hand pick, especially when we're working with some of our partner orchards that are on like semi-dwarf rootstock. Then we'll go through and we'll pick with bags. one of the events which I talked about, or we had the picture earlier, is the community crabapple harvest, and that we ask for volunteers to come help. We usually work from 8 in the morning until 12 or 1. As you know, crab apples are a nightmare to harvest, but we do the same process. We shake the trees and knock the apples down from the trees um, onto tarps, and we have a big group that usually comes up. Um, Trying to get everyone involved. At the beginning, it started with us providing food and some cider, and then over the years, it's evolved into most of the people coming up because they're repetitive now, and then we always got new people. But most of the people that come up will bring dishes to share. They'll bring homemade ciders or things that they've bought to share with everyone that they're excited about, and that meal afterwards lasts usually for a good 3 hours. And we do, like last year we had a huge harvest, so we do have other days where we have smaller versions of this that occurs. Um, then we either pick into bushel boxes or bins, depending on the amount of fruit we're picking and our desire to keep varieties separate. Sometimes we want specific fruit, such as single varieties or specific blends, so we'll do those into bushel boxes. A lot of times when we're doing field blends, we'll use bins, or if we have a large amount of this particular fruit, then we'll also use bins to do the harvest. We also source from local orchards and specify if we want the fruit separated or mixed into a field blend. Here again, you can see some pictures from our harvest. This is some more from the community crabapple harvest. This is my daughter and my son-in-law. We're picking these Glen pears that I talked about earlier. You can see the fence line from the auto repair shop, and it's growing literally between that fence line and that road. So it's a lot of knocking the apples back onto the tarp as they fall off the tree into the middle of the road before cars come by and crush them all. On the right, this is an orchard that we've been managing in Watai. This was a bunch of, we believe they're full standard trees that were mostly Red Delicious and Granny Smith trees that we've grafted over to a mix of Nihao, Kingston Black, Calaus, Teorica. We actually have about 5 or 6 different Spanish apples grafted in there, as well as, I believe, Phil Barrel and a couple seedlings. Brown's Best is grafted into there. And then on the backside, there are pear trees. We've been starting to top work those over to a lot of the local pears or the wild pear varieties that we find useful for making perry. So here's some pictures of our harvest. That's the pins. And then on the right is our bushel boxes and crates that we also harvest into, depending on what we're doing. Now, as we get to the cider making process, basically after harvest comes the business of turning the fruit into cider. As you're aware, and growing fruit is a very seasonal thing, and so is making cider for us. We generally are making the majority of our cider during the fall. Last year, because our harvest was so massive, we kept some fruit and we have a large walk-in cooler there. Well, it's not large, but we have a walk-in cooler there where we can keep fruit. So we actually had to keep fruit until February when we had tank space to be able to press and put more cider into ferment. We're a very small operation. We only have about 1,200 square feet in our cidery to make our cider within. So we operate with a small scratter, and which is a grinder to grind up the fruit into a pomace or a pulp, from which we can extract the juice. Then we either press into a bladder press using compressed air instead of water, because water is a precious commodity here. Or we also use a hydraulic racking cloth. Generally, if one of us is doing the work, the bladder press is mostly used. If we have 2 of us, then the racking cloth gets used as well in conjunction with the bladder press. After we get the juice, we will then naturally ferment it on the ambient yeast that comes in from the orchards and lives in this pressing equipment. This picture here is actually from one of a couple of events we do, where we also have the local community come in. One actually purchased their own fruit from a local U-pick orchard, and the other We harvest fruit and they come in and they get to press, but they get to take the fruit home. They learn the whole pressing process and they can either decide at that point after they get their juice, do they want to sulfite and do their own like yeast, or do they want to do a native ferment on their fruit, or maybe do a mixture of both. And the first group does apples, the ones that purchase their fruit, the ones that we provide, generally does a mix of apples and pears. Uh, Field blends and a few single varieties are often barrel fermented and aged on the leaves by us, and we use a technique called botnage. So what we do is when the cider has fermented in the barrel, we let it sit, and then when the barrels are ready to be topped, we have a little tool and we put it in the barrels and we stir the leaves back up into the cider, and then we top the barrels off and then close it back up again. Stirring the leaves helps to improve mouthfeel in the cider, and it softens harder flavor notes a lot of times. I do want to clarify, I'm not a huge fan of barrel notes in cider, so pretty much we start with neutral wine barrels, and we strip the flavor. We use a solution of SO2 and citric acid from the barrels, and then we'll rinse them out. And because what we're really looking for from the barrels is the micro oxidation and a container for us that helps us with botnage, and the barrels seem to really work for us well. The micro oxidation helps the cider by enhancing flavor, and it helps to retain color. Plus, it also helps pick up just a hint of tannin from the wood, especially in the fruit that's got lesser tannins itself. So it gives a little bit more body to the cider. A lot of, though, even though we do some single varietals in the barrels, like you can see in the picture there, that's my son Travis. Those are the bladder presses we're using. Uh, we do most of our single varieties as well as our perries in tanks. So we'll transfer after primary fermentation for aging in a tank, or sometimes in the barrel, depending on what we want to do. To clarify, when I say tank, they're mostly plastic food grade barrels with a few recent flex tanks mixed in. We do have a little bit of stainless, but majority, probably 99% or 90% at least of everything that we ferment in tank is done in food grade plastic. We do a lot of method ancestral and pet nats. So when we're fermenting, method ancestral basically bottle prior to the completion of fermentation. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but we're guessing what our finishing gravity is going to be, and we'll bottle at that time, and we'll lay the bottles down and lay them down for a year, and they'll naturally carbonate in the bottles. When we get into the method traditionnel or pet nat, we're typically letting them go dry, and so we know what our finishing gravity is. Or in the case of a couple of ciders, we want to do a couple different fermentation techniques before bottling. So it'll be dry, we'll retain juice from that harvest, and then we'll add that juice back in. And then when we're at the point that we want for our starting gravity for the fermentation, for the carbonation, we'll bottle at that point. And like I said, you get these. The really cool thing about that is you get these really wonderful, creamy, champagne bubbles in a lot of our ciders and perries. While we adhere to mostly natural methods, we do utilize forced carbonation for all of our keg ciders and a few of our bottle ciders. Tasting room and everything. So you can see it's very small. We are an urban cidery, so even though we work with all local orchards, we're located in pretty much an industrial building, and utilize it, basically the tasting room and that you can see there is our cidery, and then at the yard at the end of the shop for our pressing and storing of apples. But lastly, the majority of our ciders are not sulfited. That said, we have recently started doing a 20 ppm sulfite addition prior to packaging our ciders that are lower in acidity or lacking in tannins, as well as with our Perrys, because pears, first off, their primary acid is citric acid, which is a precursor to acetic acid, and they tend to also be lower in acidity than apples. So we want to prevent acetobacter going to work. Uh, and if you are unaware, sulfites are a byproduct of fermentation. So even if you get something that is does not have any added sulfites, there are always going to be sulfites in your fermentation. Talking about our ciders and our perries, uh, most of our ciders are dry, and then the majority, I would say 98% are dry. We have had a couple that naturally keeved. And I don't know if you know what keeving is, but keeving is a process that can be induced or can occur naturally, especially in France. And what it happens is on older trees that have they've eaten up all the nutrients in the soil, so the apples are lacking and yet basically the yan or the nitrogen that the yeast needs to ferment, and then also tend to have a high amount of calcium in the soil. So what you'll see is the juice when you press it will get this big mat that floats on top of the juice. And they call it in France a chapeau brun or a brown hat. Um, so as that mat sits on top of the juice, that's also got nutrients trapped in it and so on. So if you transfer the juice out from under that mat, the yeast will basically starve and never finish fermentation. Will leave you some residual sugars in your cider. So it's a natural way of having a sweet cider without messing around with cold racking and whatever to get it. Um, so we've had a couple that actually just naturally did it the first time it happened. I had no idea what was going on. I thought it was something, so I transferred the juice out from underneath it because I didn't want that stuff on top, which turned out to be the best move, and it worked out really well. Um, our Perry's, also with ciders, when we do have one that stalls in fermentation and it's left a little bit, it's not too sweet, it's like in that semi-sweet range, we don't worry about it. We're like fine, we'll cold rack it off and we'll have a semi-sweet cider for our customers to enjoy. So we don't like to um, back juice and try and create a semi-sweet cider for people. We're basically want our ciders to go where the fruit and the yeast and whatever is going to lead them to go. So if they decide they want to have some residual sugar, we're fine with that. I personally prefer dry, but there's nothing wrong with having something for my customers to enjoy who want something a little bit sweeter. Our Perry's naturally all have a touch of residual sweetness to one degree or the other due to sorbitol, which is a unfermentable sugar that naturally occurs in pears, sometimes more. One of the things everybody else asks questions about sorbitol, yes, it is a laxative, so we are very careful when we make perries and watch when they ferment it down, we watch what our final gravity is to know we're going to have problems. If it's above a certain point, then we may blend in some apple to drop that residual sweetness down so that people don't have issues with drinking our perries. Um, Personally, some of my favorites of our ciders are our sparkling ciders like Black Twig. We have one that's going to come out next year. Newtown Pippin. It's the first time we've done it sparkling. And I think I'm going to go that route from now on with Newtown Pippin. I think it's head and shoulders above Newtown Pippin. We do not do sparkling. We have one called Them Pet Nat Southern Apples, which is a mix of Arkansas Black, wine sap, stamen, and black twig apples. And eventually I want to start mixing in. We have some other trials going with red limber twig, black limber twig, King David, and so on that we want to start mixing into that as well in the future. Random apples we do generally as it's not sparkling, but it is naturally fermented naturally carbonated in the bottle. That's all our wild and seedling apples. And then we have Neglected Perry coming up, which is being done sparkling. It's a mix of Lincoln pears and 50-50 with wild and seedling pears. And then we've done our Perry Farrell, which is all our wild pears and seedling pears as sparkling before too. And that was a huge hit. We're going to go back to that and moving forward as well. Thank you. I realize I've probably talked far too fast. So I guess I can turn it back over to Sean if you have any questions. One thing I did think about after everything was with our family business is I just realized my wife wasn't in that conversation. My wife also is, besides being a huge help for me, helps me harvest from time to time, and she's been big in like helping labeling and she's always my sounding board for like ciders and getting input from her and what she thinks it is because she's going to be my harshest critic, and she is, and I love that about her. So, anyways, thank you very much for listening. I hope that it was interesting for you. And if you have more questions about the seedlings or anything like that, let me know.
Thank you, Dave. That was really great, and I didn't mean to not include your wife on some of the slides, but you did start a whole damn cidery for her, so I mean, that's some real love right there. And we do have some questions, and I'm going to be a little selfish because I'm the host, and so I think Dave is pretty modest. In getting to know him, this is more of a statement than a question, but. If you ever follow Matt Kaminsky's pomological exhibition out in Massachusetts that just happened last weekend, Dave submits a lot of fruit. I think I might do a couple every year, maybe one or two. That's what most people do. Dave is submitting a lot. And actually, one of his pears won the best tasting pear last year. We'll see. I don't know if you were a winner this year, but maybe a runner up on some things.
Yeah, I think we were a runner-up on best looking apple, which was the Mangini apple.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, yeah. I did see that. That is a good looking apple. And then also some of the work for the rest of you out there as well. Some of this, I've encouraged Dave to apply for the Claypool grant that NAFEX has in order to support this kind of orchard, this trial seedling work. And members, you should go check it out on the member site. We haven't had people, really accessing that type of money, that grant money for some of this work that you hear Dave's doing. So I've encouraged Dave to apply for that. And another thing I think that was super interesting is that we had Cummings Nursery in the past talking about rootstock and certain ones that voles and gophers might not go for. So I think Eric Bina is probably a little bit more versed on that, but that was really interesting about the M111 rootstock. So with all those statements out of the way, I'm going to start asking you some of the questions from the Q&A because there's 11 of them. So here we go, and we do have about 30 minutes time. So, what do you see as differences in apple quality / properties based upon the rootstock used?
I haven't found a lot of difference.
Oh,
I mean, in the
can you stop the screen share real quick?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of difference in the fruit quality. I have noticed like differences in the fruit from the mother trees. Say like I mentioned, we have Brown's Best grafted onto a full standard in an orchard setting that we top work the tree over to, and the fruit from the mother tree versus the fruit from the grafted variety both create the same things, but we get a little bit, actually, funny enough, we got a little bit higher sugar from the fruit growing on the tree that was grafted than we did on the mother tree. And they also seem to ripen just a touch earlier, which is also seems strange, but the mother tree seems to ripen later with a little less sugar than the grafted variety. But as far as like from one rootstock B118. We don't know enough about B118 yet to really know, but with the P18 and the Antonovka, what we've had, the fruit seems to be equivalent in fruit quality.
Okay, thank you for that. You said that some of your fruit comes from, this is from our member Eric Bina, comes from 80 to 100-year-old orchards. Have those trees been under irrigation all that time, or are there some
Yeah.
locations that don't require supplemental water?
No, a lot of those orchards are not under irrigation. Most of them are dry farmed. If you look at the spacing on the trees, they're like 25 to like 40 feet apart. And in these old orchards, but the trees are massive and they're dry farmed. One that we take care of in Julian, to assist the trees because it is drying out. We are getting drier than we used to be. We've taken dead wood and pruned wood, and we've been mounting up wood chip piles around the trees to help retain moisture. But no, those trees are, I think that's the Moser orchard. Those trees are from, I think, around 1910, and they've been dry farmed for at least 40 years. So there was irrigation on them, but the orchard was abandoned for about 30 something years, and then we've been taking care of it for, I think, close to 8 years now, and it's been dry farmed that entire time.
Oh wow, okay. Would you say that dry farming has added to the complexity of the fruit? Do you taste a difference?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the dry farming, you've got more flavor intensity. I mean, one of the things I touched on is that because of our dry weather here, we get very high. I think I touched on it. We have very high sugars in our fruit. So typically, where most people they're talking about their ciders being an imperial cider at 8%, that's normally where our ciders start, is around 8%. So it's got these intense sugars, but found and unless you get sugars that are just crazy. We had golden russet we let sit on a tree and 1 year and on the trees for 1 year very late, and they actually produced a cider that was 14%, but I found it to be unbalanced because the sugars, everything kind of started to knock down the what I love about golden russet, which is the acids and so on that they get. So yeah, I mean, going for ultra high sugar is not always the best thing. So I think it's a lot like the wine world. They're finding that with wines on the West Coast too, is they're actually looking to rebalance wines by going to people who reduce the alcohol content to balance them back out. But yeah, we get much more intense flavors, I think, at times from our fruit because we had 1 year of Jonathan where it hit 11%, and it's this insane, intense, like Venus, like cider. The next year, which was last year, it hit 7.8%. And so it's more like what I would think of the Jonathan cider being like more acid. It's really light and refreshing and so on, but two complete different animals because of the weather we had. So again, last year we had crazy a crazy wet winter that lasted all the way until May, June, actually, where trees weren't even like starting to bud out until June. And then we had a tropical storm that hit in the spring, and plus two, three other really good rains. So it's not produce the sugars they normally do here.
Oh wow. So are you not using that many sweets because your residual sugar is so just naturally high there?
Yeah, we don't use a lot of sweets. We have a couple things we use. I mean, Golden Delicious I find is a great blender. It adds a lot of flavor. So that's one sweet we do use, and we do have some wild sweets that we always throw into, or seedling sweets that we'll throw into our random apple blends to kind of balance some of the insane acidity and tannins that we get with the wild fruit, but with some of the wild fruit. But yeah, we do use sweets, but they're not made. We're usually looking for bitter sharps, bitter sweets, and sharps.
Okay. So do you sell any of your ciders locally? I mean, that's sorry, outside of the San Diego area.
Well, we do have, I mean, in California, we're sold up in the Bay Area and some areas in Los Angeles, but nationally, we have our website and you can go online and purchase. I think we can ship somewhere between 40. It varies all the time. Every time I look, between 40 and 43 states in the
Okay.
country.
Okay. And just to let you guys know, Leslie is in the background in the dark drinking cider from Raging Cider. Or me. uh, when making cider,
Just totally outed. I am not.
this is Photoshop, CGI. Uh, so when making cider, do you make separate ciders for apple by apple type and then mix later or mix the apples by type and percentage? Like, are you crafting your ciders based upon different varieties and the percentages of those?
We do both.
Oh,
So some things we blend together, the different varieties. Other things we we've done them for so many years. We know if we press this many of this apple, this many of this apple, this many of this apple, it's generally going to taste very close to the same year after year. So we'll just do a combined pressing for those ciders, and then others. I mean, also we sometimes we're pressing fruit that we've not worked with, and so we'll ferment it out, see what the flavor profiles are, and then we're like, okay, this is not going to be good on its own, but hey, I got something over here that needs acid or needs some tannin or whatever, and so then we'll do blending as well. So this might be a one-off cider for that year. I mean, some years I've made upwards of 45 different ciders because we've just had so much fruit and so many different varieties and so on. And then other years like this, we'll be lucky if we make 15 or 20 because we had such a small harvest.
Oh no, okay. This one comes from Dan Doherty, Cider Sage. Any anecdotal info you can share about? I can't pronounce this word right. Teorica.
Teorica,
Yeah.
it's a very sharp apple.
Okay.
It's like the foxwhelp of Spain.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
I
Anything
mean, the
you can
real
share about that?
foxwhelp, not the. It's just. I mean, we mostly use. I've not got a ton of experience. Last year was the first year it actually fruited for us in any quantity, and we use it in our. We have make a cider called Furiosa, which is kind of our homage to Spanish cider. We use right now we're using Colaus and Teorica, and we have a number of other Spanish varieties that haven't produced yet. Um, so we're waiting on them. But yeah, mostly that's what I found. It's not a huge producer, at least here, so I don't know if it really likes it here. Whereas Colaus, which is another Spanish apple, is a beast. It just produces apples. Even this year, where we had a really off year, they still produce a good amount of apples. So,
Oh,
so
wow.
Teorica is I'm still the jury is out. I mean, we'll probably still grow it, but because I really like the intense acidity that we get. And I will note too, that's another thing is I didn't really get into this, but just talking nationally about growing regions, I find when I drink like ciders from the East Coast, generally they tend to, especially some places like Pennsylvania and Maine and so on, they tend to be more slaty, you get less tannin, super high acid. When you get out to the West Coast, when you go to Northern California, where the soils are more sandy and loamy, they get tons of tannins, but they struggle with acidity. And then you get down here where our soils are more granitic, we get tannins and we get acidity, which is kind of fun. And that's not everywhere. I mean, I know I have fantastic ciders from some places, especially in the Finger Lakes and so on. But there's a really cool one year we grow hyslop crabapple. There's a lot of it planted here. It was used widely as a pollinator, and it also uh, was used for pickling in restaurants up in LA. So it was very popular to grow here for a while. And one of the things that's cool about it is in Maine, it was far from the tree, I think, did a single varietal hyslop crab apple cider, and we did a single varietal, and we traded. And his was just like all acid, just very light tannins, all acid. Ours was like this super dense, like tannin heavy, crunchy cider with just
Wow.
mild acidity. So it's just crazy talking about terroir and
Yeah.
growing regions. So and I'm assuming that Teorica maybe produces a bunch more acid here than it would in other places, but on the East Coast, maybe even more.
So terroir, what works in one part of the country doesn't necessarily work well in another part of the country. So is there a lot of just trying things out, seeing how they work? If they don't, call them, maybe top work them or change it out because it might be a good apple on the East Coast, but it's not performing well in Southern California.
Yeah, and we do a lot of that here, and even in areas of the county, it varies. I mean, I know Muscata Bernay and Julian does not produce very well, but the orchard that we manage in Descant and Quatai, which is basically at the same elevation but farther south, for whatever reason, our trees produce very well. They're biennial, but when they're on, they produce a ton of apples. Yet in Julian, my friend's orchard, he's got them planted, and he rarely gets more than a few apples a tree. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, and we're always doing that. I mean, I've got a lot of. If you go to my, like I said, my experimental orchard at home, I've got a lot of trees that have been like cut off and pre-grafted onto like 2 or 3 times. It's like, okay, this variety sucks, but I've got this great root base going, so I'll just
Right.
graft another one on. So
Right, might as well jump ahead.
yeah.
For the older orchards, this is another question. Any sign of truffles? That's an interesting one.
No, there's no. I mean, there's not truffles per se. I mean, I'm a mushroom nerd. The only truffles on the West Coast where you can actually, which are truffles that you can eat, are up in Oregon. But we do have. I think the jury's out on it. There's a Pistolithus arizus, which is called dead man's foot. It grows locally with the oaks and the eucalyptus, but I found it a lot, especially in the orchard. Up in Julian growing. We do have, we do have rhizopogon, which is a truffle-like mushroom. They produce a fruity body that's underground, but they're not edible or anything.
Oh, okay.
So we
Um,
do, and whenever we do our planting, we always do a root dip into a mycorrhizal solution prior to planting
yeah,
to give our trees every opportunity they can to harvest water.
absolutely get that root structure going.
Yeah.
Another question, how small batch, okay, how small batches of cider for flavor do you create? How many small batches of ciders for flavor testing do you create in a year?
It varies from year to year depending on how many varieties that we've not really messed with as a single varietal. So some years we may have five, six, seven, eight, nine different like 3, 5, 1. I've had 1 gallon batches of something because that's all the fruit we got that year.
Oh, wow.
Even like half-gallon batches just to see what it tastes like. I always laugh because there used to be a cider here called Julian Cider Works, and um, the wife, I was asking about the golden hornet apples they had. She said, "Here, I've never." She goes, "Don't tell Brian I did this, but I made a quarter gallon of this just to see what it's like." And it was phenomenal. But yeah, so we'll do small batches, and like this year we're going to have a lot of our batches are going to be between 7 and 50 gallons. I mean, there's nothing big going on here at all this year. So
So, wait, hold on one second. Hold on. Okay, so the question is basically, you've got a lot of these ciders available, and how do you know to keep going with a certain one? Is it based upon customer demand, particular customer favorites, or are you and why do you think they are customer favorites or in demand? Like, obviously you're producing because you have to sell a product and an innovative product at that, but how do you match demand with innovation and what you produce?
So when we find stuff that's sold well for us, we'll go back and we'll do those batches again. Or if it's something that I've personally found amazing, I'll go back and make it again. Like, well, I just love this. So that's why black twig, whenever we can get enough black twigs, we generally will do that every year. We can get enough black twigs, which this is sounding like with all the rest of the harvest this year being off, the black twig harvest is going to be insane. We're at like, I mean, for us, it's insane. Like, I think at minimum of 3 bins of black twigs.
Oh,
So
wow.
which for us that's a good amount. So,
And that's it.
but yeah, and then other ones that have done basically is the ones that perform really well. We'll continue to do those. If we found other things that didn't do so well, we may do them again, maybe tweak them.
Okay.
But again, I always tell my customers like if you really like something in a year, you should buy it that year because with us doing native fermentation, the weather changes every year and so on, it's never going to taste the same. I mean, we're not here to do repeatability. We're all about the vintage or pomage or however you want to call it of the cider or the perry for that year.
Okay. So what next question is when picking up fallen fruit from orchards, do you sanitize the fruit before pressing it? I was chided recently by an academic because he felt that picking up the fruit off the ground, even with washing, was unsafe due to risk of E. coli, etc. Hard cider does not get high enough alcohol content to kill those bacteria, correct? Question mark.
No, as far as I understand, and this is why I believe it was the USDA did a test where they fermented fruit from the ground, and the early part of fermentation basically killed off anything that's dangerous or deleterious to you. I've read something, someone was talking about a fungus. It doesn't grow here, so it's not an issue for us, but, we rinse when the fruit's dirty. When the fruit's not dirty, we don't even rinse it. So, of course, a lot of the soil in the orchards is not covered with grass like it is in other places.
Yeah,
It's
I
pretty
noticed
dirty, so
that.
we will rinse. Yeah, we will rinse that fruit, but yeah, we don't do any sanitization, and never had an issue with it. I've drank fresh pressed juice from that fruit for 9 years, and I mean, I know it's only anecdotal, but I've not ever gotten sick from it.
Okay. Wow, we got a little bit of time and a lot of questions. Let's see. So the next question, one of the next questions is, I tried to make hard cider from eating apples and it fermented well, but the cider was very bitter. Was that a function of sweet apples or yeast I used or some other factor?
It's, I mean, it's a lot to do with the fruit. I mean, generally, when you're making cider, you want fruit that has at least acidity and sweetness, or tannins and sweetness. But generally, you want all three to some degree. So when you're using dessert fruit, you're going to lack in that. Some dessert fruit, I mean, there's a low chill apple that grows here called Anna, and it's a dessert fruit. It's terrible on its own, but if you actually grind it up and macerate the pomace for like 3 days and then press it off, you'll extract some tannins from the skins, and so it'll give it a lot more character. It's kind of crazy. I have my friend at Tanuki Cider up in Santa Cruz does a lot with Gravenstein and Newtown Pippins, and he does that with both those varieties. He'll grind them up, macerate them for 2 3 days, and then press them off to get a little bit more body and heft to
Okay.
his ciders.
Thank you. Another question we have about your soil techniques are what tree or soil cues do you utilize to determine when to irrigate 3 to 4 times a year? Question mark. Visuals like leaf curl, discoloration, leaf fruit drop, or do you look for more of the soil qualities and moisture and use moisture probes? I'm growing in central Texas over 100 days without any rain this season. Thank you. So I think that is a question. We're having this, climate shift, especially in different regions. We've been in a drought for 2 months. So what is your trigger? What's giving you that cue to provide supplemental irrigation when necessary?
When it's with the older trees, it's basically we're looking for tree cues. So we're watching for the leaves are starting to curl. Um, that's our really our primary indicator, is watching for that, or fruit drop. You start getting early fruit drop as well. But generally, we have a set schedule, and we'll water um, on that schedule. If it's a dry area, we just add in extra water to that
You're a
schedule.
little
So.
muted there. Can you repeat that just that last part?
Oh, I said if it's a drier year, we'll generally just add in an extra deep watering, and if the trees look like they need it, we'll throw in another one as well. But yeah, I mean,
Okay.
because you can say, oh yeah, I want to be a dry farm, but you really have to, you can't be like dogmatic about it. You have to make sure your trees stay alive, or there's no point. So.
Right, right. Okay, well, we did it. That's it. We got through the Q&A and this amazing presentation. Thank you, Dave, for taking your time to give us a different perspective on growing fruit in a different region and making cider that many of us probably could learn from in terms of just shifting climate change, working with feral and seedling fruit. So once again, there's that PowerPoint that Dave had up. We'll have this session recorded. So if any of you have, like what Dave is doing with his ciders and would like to order those online or Perry's, you can visit the website Raging Cider and Mead Company.com or ragingcider.com, right?
RagingCiderMead.com.
RagingCiderMead.com. So please do that. Dave did mention some seedling and feral fruit tree trials. He might have some scion available in the future. If you guys would like to possibly buy scion and graft out some trees that have done well in the southern climate of or Southern California.
And I'm open to trading too, so.
Oh yeah, you're over. Yeah, because I'm gonna trade with you. So guys, for the next talk coming up, we have Chris Heaters leading a session with our own Lee Reich, and that has to do with no space, no problem. Basically, growing fruit trees in maybe a espalier form or oblique cordon, as well as growing in probably grow bags and pots. So utilizing the space that you're giving to growing fruit trees and not having that be a hindrance to your fruit growing dreams or goals. So please stay tuned for that. That's the next session. And with that, I would like to conclude this session. And once again, thanks Dave Carr of Raging Cider, Chris O'Mannix, and Leslie Wade for supporting me on this call, although she's drinking in the background. It's always great to have the help. And that's it. So thank you so much. And Dave, we really appreciate it. And I'm sure we're going to work together in the future in terms of just hearing more about your trials, and hopefully you access some of the grant money that we have for these kind of things.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. With that, I'm going to end this call. And then please stay tuned to the next session. Have a great day.